Are we ready to praise him? Then let's praise the Lord. Come on, let's go into his presence with thanksgiving in our hearts.
Someone I know you have wanted to meet and now have the opportunity. And that's our very own general in the Tennessee Valley area, and that's General Jerry Walker. You'll be learning a little bit more about him. He's a person who actually has met, maybe knows, he can tell us a little more about that, General Schwarzkopf and also General Powell's. So he is going to help us get a little bit of an insight into some things that are happening, but more than that is impacting what needs to happen once our men and women come back from the Persian Gulf, or whatever war it would be. General, welcome to Vision Plus.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's good to be with you.
We're going to have you tell us a little bit about you. Now, the scuttlebutt is that you know General Schwarzkopf and Powell, and tell us how you happen to know them.
Well, I spent 33 years in the Army, having retired in August of 1989. And since that time, my wife Mary and I have made our home here in Huntsville. I knew General Schwarzkopf from the days that he was a division commander of the 24th Division at Fort Stewart, Georgia. And then as he became then later on the Corps Commander of I Corps at Fort Lewis, Washington. And during part of that time, I was in Forces Command, which was the big headquarters of both of those units. But he and our paths have crossed many times. And of course, my last 5.5 months in the Army, I was General Colin Powell's Director of Intelligence at Forces Command in Atlanta, Georgia. So I know them both and have served very closely with General Powell.
And are they doing a good job?
Absolutely.
Are they in control?
You bet.
Let's just hope that they are. Now, you, in 33 years, you've been through a couple of these skirmishes that's gone on around the world. Vietnam was one that, let's start with that one. We won't go any further back than that, but how does that compare with what's happening over in the Persian Gulf now?
Well, there are some comparisons and some similarities, but fortunately, I think for our country and for the well-being of our society, there are some significant differences, and I think those are the things that ought to be talked about. The differences primarily are that as our president has said, it seems to me our cause is just. Had the United States taken on the responsibilities of stopping Hitler in the 1930s, World War II could have been a significantly lesser endeavor for this nation. It certainly would have cost us less in lives, and that's most important. You simply cannot have a society of nations in which one nation goes around beating up on other nations. That's not what most peace-loving, freedom-loving democracies believe, and I think that therefore we are just in our cause because Saddam Hussein had to be stopped. There were certainly security interests to the United States of America. I'm not sure the security interests to the United States of America were as significant in Vietnam. We did not go about Vietnam perhaps in the right way, and of course hindsight's a wonderful thing, but we did not build up the force we needed there soon enough. Again, General Powell and General Schwarzkopf have seen that the force we have in the Middle East is sufficient to take on the job, and that's important from a military standpoint. But perhaps most important is that so far most of this nation stands with the President and with our troops, and I think that's important for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen that are in the Middle East, because I can assure you that their morale is directly affected by whether or not they believe the people of this country support what they're doing. And I sense that in fact we as a nation are supporting them. Certainly there have been anti-war demonstrations, and there will continue to be, and there is a place in our society for that. the irony of all of this is that those young people in the Middle East are guaranteeing the right of the dissenter to dissent. And as long as that dissent does not focus itself on our soldiers, then I won't have any problem with it. I'm not necessarily in support of them, but certainly they have the right to dissent. And as long as they keep the focus of that dissent correct, then I see no problem. That was not true in Vietnam. Finally, the dissent started out being focused on the soldier. And the soldier is not a policy maker. He's an implementer. The president and the Congress make policies. Soldiers simply do not do that. They implement whatever policy the president wishes to implement. And so I believe that there are great differences between the two. I'm especially pleased with the support that's evidenced here in our own community and in North Alabama. I believe that our people have particularly done a good job with their enthusiasm and caring attitude about sending our National Guardsmen and reservists off to serve in the Middle East.
In fact, we have more of our fair share, if you could use that terminology,
absolutely,
of the people from northern Alabama that are serving.
One of the local TV stations has indicated that in fact we have, Alabama now has 6,000 National Guard and reservists on active duty, the great majority of them serving in the Middle East. And that's a significant number of people. I believe the figure now is that there are 22,000 people from Alabama serving in the armed forces of our country. That's a goodly part of our population, and they deserve the support and concern of everybody in the state, and particularly right here in our own community.
We could have had this all wouldn't have had to happen if the war to end all wars had been a war to end all wars. And my uncle served in the First World War. So
absolutely.
I guess that this is happening, you know, periodically. Do you feel that as the book is out, and many of them are, but there's one right here in Huntsville at a local bookstore that says this is the Armageddon, how do you feel about that?
No, I don't necessarily agree with that. I believe it's important, and you should compare those things in the Bible that relate to history and the things that happen around us. I just simply do not believe that this is the real war to end all wars, which is Armageddon. And I believe that if and when that time comes, it won't be at the behest of someone like Saddam Hussein.
I agree with that. And also, it says very definitely in the Bible that all the world will have heard about Jesus Christ. And
sure.
At this moment, everyone hasn't heard about it.
That's right. Absolutely.
How do you feel about the people that are coming back, when they do come back home? What are we supposed to be doing? You're saying that it's different from Vietnam, and we all feel like that it won't be long, maybe this week, this month, and then they're saying 6 months, now a year, and we don't know how long. But when that time comes, how are we as a community to receive our boys and girls back again?
That may be more important than how we sent them off. As you know, in Vietnam, we never welcomed home the soldier. And I happen to have been one of those soldiers, so I speak from experience. I would simply say that the community must do all that it can to welcome those young people back with the same degree of enthusiasm and caring that they sent them off. It will be even more important to them. They must be assimilated back into our community. They must have jobs. We must do everything we can as a community to express to them our appreciation, because many of them are undergoing some real hardships. It's difficult to walk away from a steady job and put on a uniform and go serve your nation. It's not easy for any reservist or National Guardsman. And these young people deserve our concern, and this community needs to be thinking now about how to do that, rather than waiting until they all get off the airplane.
Well, what are some things that we can, if we should be preparing for it now, how can we do that?
Well, I would hope that the civic leaders in our community will do all they can to ensure those jobs are waiting for them. Of course, some of those jobs are protected under law.
Absolutely,
but again,
because they're supposed to be holding your job.
Absolutely.
So that when you come back, that job will be available for you.
Yes, and that's got to be done. We can't allow that not to occur. For those young people that might not have had jobs when they went away to war, we need to ensure that there's some way to help them find employment that will use the skills that they have. And again, perhaps the best thing we could do is, as I said, hold the same kind of welcome home parades as we did send-off parades. That'll be very meaningful to them.
Mm-hmm. And there are so many things that can be done right now. What are some of the things that are available, like family support services and chaplains? And
apparently, from all I've read and heard and my discussions with people, those family support groups that have been established here in our community, both at Redstone Arsenal and then by those individual units that have deployed, the 109th, the Marine Artillery Battery that deployed, all of those organizations have family support groups, and they seem to be doing a good job in supporting the wives, husbands, and children of those people who deployed, and that must continue. And certainly our community ought to do what we can to support those family support groups, whether it be through monetary donations, or whether it be if we're asked to do something to help them accomplish the things they're trying to do. You remember that a reservist and a National Guardsman, his family is not used to separation, and so I'm sure many of these families are dealing with some very difficult hardships, and these family support groups are absolutely invaluable to them during this particular time.
they actually have places out at the Arsenal that you can call. The chaplain is out there, the public affairs department. There are many that you can call so that you can find out, and you can ask anything. And they will have a department that helps you in doing that. Now, in the last couple of days, there's been the story about the woman that her son over there wrote home and said, "Mom, send me all of your pantyhose, old pantyhose, because I want to cover my M16. It's getting sand in it and moisture." And so she came up with this idea of designing this M16 sock. So it's now on the market, and she's the sock company donated $450,000 or thereabouts to them. It's not something that anyone might want to make money about with. Now, if someone has an idea, because I understand that it's very difficult for them to detect the bunkers, where the bunkers are for one thing, and to get the bombs into those bunkers to destroy them. If someone has an idea of something that they'd like to have an engineer, we're full of engineers here in this area, how would they go about getting that information to the right people without the Iraqis finding out about it?
Well, there are a number of ways, and obviously I'm more familiar with how you would do that in the Army. All ideas that lead to better ways of doing business in the United States Army generally are born in what we call the Training and Doctrine Command at Fort Monroe, Virginia. Training and Doctrine Command at Fort Monroe, Virginia. Fort Monroe, Virginia. And then those ideas, if the decision is made to take those on and that it's something that can be used throughout the Army, the development of that thing, whatever it may be, is carried out by the Army Materiel Command, whose headquarters is in Alexandria, Virginia. You can always use the public affairs people who have access to all of those commands. Now, that's an actual department. We hear the word, there's public affairs, and there's public affairs. So there's a department that you can call. Actually, there's a departmental level, a public affairs person at every level in the Department of Defense. The gentleman you're seeing a lot of these days, Mr. Pete Williams, is the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. That is his job. The Department of the Army has a Public Affairs Assistant Secretary, and And so you find the public affairs people at every level, to include right here at Redstone Arsenal, of course.
And those people, if you have the idea, you could go directly to one of these people.
I believe so. And again, here at Redstone Arsenal, there is a training and doctrine command liaison officer. If people would like to be put in touch with him, I could assist them in some of that.
Okay,
perhaps.
that's General Jerry Walker. General, when you were a little boy growing up, did you ever think you'd be a general?
Absolutely not. I entered the Army in 1956 to serve my 2 years and come back home. One thing led to another, and pretty soon more than 4 or 5 years had gone by. Then I met my wife and we got married, and I had a family to take care of, so obviously it was a bad time to quit doing anything. But
and Mary's with us in the studio today.
Yeah.
Wish she would have come over, but she didn't want to do that. Okay.
But anyway, in fact, I went to, in 1983, I went to Fort Huachuca, Arizona to spend my last tour in the Army and retire. And then the Army, showing that it had a great sense of humor, selected me to be a brigadier general, and I was promoted in November of '84 and served as a brigadier general until my retirement in August of '89.
Did you notice that people really change when you go from colonel to general? And it's,
some people do. I can give you...
No, I'm talking about the people that,
people.
other people around you, you know.
Absolutely.
There's an aura and awe about a person who has the title of a general.
I'm not sure why there's an aura or an awe about that, but certainly some people do react in that fashion. I would just tell you that going back to General Schwarzkopf and General Powell, those are two gentlemen who have not changed a bit in the time that from the time they entered the Army until now. They are still the same genuine human beings they've always been, and I think that speaks well for both of them.
Do you wish that you were still working with them?
No,
on a day-to-day
not
basis?
really. There's a story out in the newspapers now where one retired general said he would give almost anything to be back in the military. I have not had that same feeling, and as the story goes on to say, a war is the worst place in the world for overage generals, so we don't need any of those, I don't think.
Well, you're working with SAI.
Analysis, operations security kinds of analysis, and our customers are essentially the same one as everybody here, the Army Missile Command and of course the Army Strategic Defense Command here in Huntsville.
Well, back to what's happening over in the Gulf. Do you think that it's going as quickly, even
to the United Nations? So it is.
Tell me about Terry Arnold.
You're going to have a big mess here on stage. I can make fat jokes, but I don't like to hear them. But anyway, well, Terry Arnold is originally from Tennessee. I was born in a small town in East Tennessee and was raised there in a little place called Spring City, Tennessee, which I tell people it says "Welcome to Spring City" on both sides of the same sign. Small town.
Small town.
Small town. But Spring City, we had 2 red lights, you know, that kind of thing. But it was a great place to grow up. I was raised by my grandfather. I was adopted by my grandparents when I was, I don't know, about 6 or 7 years old, and
pretty young at the time.
Pretty young. And our grandmother was killed about a year later in a car wreck. So I was basically raised by my grandfather. And my mother, because she had a husband over in Nashville and various other circumstances, couldn't be with us a lot. And so it was just basically me and my brother and my grandfather. So, but there was good things about that, in that I got a good foundation in the Word, because every time the church doors opened, and a lot of times we unlocked them, we were at church.
I'm surprised your grandfather didn't marry again. Somebody help me with these two boys.
Well, he would have, except that he felt that it would be better if, I guess he didn't introduce another element into the house or something, I don't know. But he had a little, he had him a girlfriend all the time. And everybody thought it was kind of a joke. But the guy said, well, because he knew that I'd worked with the martial arts some and that, you know, that a few things like that. And he said, well, I'd like for you to do some bodyguard work for me. So I did. And I told him, well, I don't really want to get involved in anything that I shouldn't be doing. He said, well, don't worry about it. You'll be out of it. Again, the Lord was keeping his hand on me.
So what did you do to be a bodyguard for
well,
mafia guy?
He just came by and said, well, I'll give you $50 if you'll go with me tonight and stand there and be big. So I do that fairly well. I can stand there and be big. So,
$50
yeah,
2 years ago.
For a starving college student, that was a fortune. And I did this several times for him. I mean, it was real minor, low-level stuff, you know, paying off an official not to inspect a restaurant quite as closely or things like that.
So they could keep the restaurant open. Those were probably front.
It just, what it did was it revolutionized my attitude toward going to church. I had, when I had gone to church, I had gone to, it was almost like a social setting. And I got there and I'd look up at the pastor and I'd go, all right, Bubba, make it good. Keep me awake. And don't you go past a 11:45 because I want to beat everybody down to Shoney's or the local restaurant or
Piccadilly
or wherever it is. You know, you better make it good and keep me awake and keep it short and don't say anything that's going to offend me because I'm liable to take my money elsewhere. And that unfortunately was my attitude toward church. What I learned there was that going to church and worship, because I'll be honest with you, Bonnie, when I started doing that and I really started getting up in front of the folks, the old head started doing this number. And I was doing a lot of singing, a lot of preaching, and the Lord said, no, you're not going to take my glory. And he said, I want you on the back seat. I want you on the back seat for a while. And I went through some really tough times. A lady told me, who it scared the pants off of me at the time, but she said, Terry, there's no great man of God that has ever been who's not gone through a desert experience. So I went through a desert experience in the middle 80s that was very, very tough, going through a divorce, and it was very, very rough, but the Lord brought me through that. And now I know that I know what he's got for me. And he has been positioning me and positioning me and positioning me to bring me to this point to where he can really use me.
And I understand that was even a prophecy for you.
It was that. A couple of Saturdays ago, a fellow named Joe Medina, who had been here previous to that at a Full Gospel Businessmen's meeting, came in the studio, and we did a videotape with him, and he prophesied all over Chuck, Vicki, and myself. And it was part of the prophecy that he had been positioning me for many, many months to bring me to this point, but that I was walking in his will, and I was in the right place at the right time.
Well, Victory Network has been going on for a few years now, but I've been involved in a TV station. This will be the 3rd year, so it's about 4 years old or thereabouts. But how is this new change, this new evolving that's going through the way the Lord is just opening it up?
Well, that's neat that you would ask that. Of course, I have a background in radio. And one of the things that we're going to be doing here is a new concept in Christian television that, as far as I know, Bonnie, has never been done before. What it is, we're going to do some programming that's going to be based almost like radio programming. And then we're going to use Christian music videos. Now, a gentleman named Fred Montgomery and myself are doing a program every morning on the Victory Network, Monday through Friday.
7 to 9 a.m.
7 to 9 a.m. called the AM Show. Arnold Montgomery Show, right?
I love it. And also, that's Monday through Friday, but rerun again over the weekend. Is that right?
Well, no, we're not going to rerun the AM Show.
Oh, okay,
we're going to rerun Rain in the Valley. Rain in the Valley is, of course, with Chuck and Vicki
this
Taylor.
is live, isn't it?
It's a live show every morning. It's going to be a very fast-paced show. We're going to have music videos. We're going to have news, weather, sports. We're going to have different features from like Breaking Free Rescue Mission Jennifer does, of course, a show called Newsmakers, and Tom does a show periodically. Lately, he's been very
I'm Bonnie Libhart, and along with me is Brenda Martin, and this is Vision Plus. Without a vision, the people perish. Brenda is the owner of a company called Lighthouse Network. We're going to be learning a little bit about what that is. She just said to me a verse that's a favorite of mine. She says she always wants to live in the light. I said in 1 John 6, it says 7, but if we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with Him, with the Lord Jesus Christ. Brenda, welcome to Vision Plus and Victory Network.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Now, Brenda, you are a person that does consultation both for individuals, companies, and you do seminars, and goal setting, even weight control and self-esteem.
Correct. What I've done is I went in and set up a company geared with helping people learn how to fix themselves. Because what I find that people are taught, and that is to be dependent on someone other than themselves. And what I want to do is teach people that you do not have to buy into another company or their philosophy in order to heal your pain. And people have to start looking inside themselves. So what I wanted to do was create a company that's affordable and will help people get themselves back on track. And the important thing, anytime weight is mentioned, it's real important for me to be able to come in and say, but I don't teach them how to lose weight. What I teach them is how to deal with their obstacles and how to get around them. I teach them how to make the changes. I teach people that my philosophy in life is that each one of us is different. Not two people have the same fingerprints. So it's real important that you understand that even though maybe your birth wasn't planned by your parents, God didn't make a mistake. He intended for you to be here. So what I try and teach people is, no matter who you are, there is a little piece of you that is very, very special. And so many times the media and the propaganda is that we are not worthy, that there's something wrong with us. And what happens is when we compare ourselves to everyone, what is it I want out of my life? What can I learn from it and take with me? What do I need to leave behind? But what I was subject to in my environment is the people around me were not big in education. The majority of the men ended up going to prison. It was just a very violent environment. But what I saw was some people made it, some people didn't. And the difference was the education. And I ended up dropping out of high school. I was pregnant. And I really thought I was nothing more than a statistic. I would be on welfare, and that would be the end of my life. But even though my environment was not a very gentle environment, the one thing I've got to say for my mother is she raised me believing in God. And that is, she always taught me, you can talk to God, and if you listen real hard, God will give you your answers. Now, that was a real strange thing to be taught, especially in the environment that I grew up in. My parents, I knew that if they would go to church, our family would be okay, they could be healed, and I could never get them to go to church. But basically, that's how the company ended up evolving, as I understood that education makes the difference. And what I wanted to do was help somebody find something within themselves that would help kind of pass it along to them.
Well, if you were pregnant, dropped out of school, then how did you go from that to now teaching goal setting and motivating other people?
Well, you know, I've heard so many people say, you know, life isn't fair. They were a victim. And that's true. But who said life was supposed to be fair? And what is your definition of fair and what is my definition of fair? I think that there are no guarantees. If life had been easy for me, I wouldn't be who I turned out to be, and I like me. I turned out to be a real good person because no matter what was set in front of me, and no matter how many times I lost and how many times I had to start over, I always did what I knew in my heart was the right thing to do. It didn't mean it was the easy thing. It didn't mean it was the fun thing. But I also knew that if you're going to reach out and grab something, you better have something in your hand to trade off. Life is not a free ride. You've got to give something, and sometimes those are difficult changes to make.
If your father was like that, how about your other brothers and family members?
My two older brothers have spent time in prison, and I explained to my daughter it was as if God...
Wonderful treasure that they served so many years.
Now, I don't know religion enough to know to put these things together, but I've learned why it's important to forgive. I was having problems with a person in my life that was just... My God is a kind and loving God, and He doesn't punish. And He loves me so much. He is my Father. Now, what is the best thing in the world that one of your children can do to you? And that's to come and talk to you, right?
Yes.
Even though you already heard from somebody else what they did today, the fact that your child comes and tells you everything, well, that's what God wants to hear from me. Even though He has seen it, He loves it. When I say, God, pull up a chair, we need to talk. He loves it because I am coming home and I'm telling him all the wonderful things that I know he has implemented in doing. He's been very instrumental in doing. But what I did was when I was really lost, I said, you know, Lord, you've brought me this far. You have not made my decisions for me. You've loved me enough to allow me to make them. And when you did not think I was making the wise ones, you still stood there with me and saw me through them. Now when I am at my darkest and I really don't know where it is I'm going, I'm lifting it all up to you. I'm giving you these things. Help me, Lord, because to me my career had always been so important to me.
Here on Victory Network. You know, this is a week books written. I'm hoping that maybe I and some other of you women can do an anthology together. I'm springing this on her. She doesn't know I'm going to ask her to do that. But just to have a lot of people have something to say, and she's one of them that has a lot to say. So, now if I've stressed you out by thinking you're going to learn all of that in the next 30 minutes, she also teaches stress management. So we can take care of that little challenge too. But today we want to talk about creating a positive image. And Brenda Martin on my extreme, blush on.
You can go to the extremes in anything. You can wear too much jewelry. You know, you've seen the bouffant hairstyles. You can have your hair up too high. You know, so there are things of look appropriate.
Don't hang out with the wallflower now. I wouldn't want to clump myself in that.
I'm already feeling badly enough. I don't need a wallflower too.
Well, okay, that was a little extreme. I agree with you. But if you're creating a positive impression, sometimes, really my point was, if you can make another person feel happy, and you can bring a smile to their face and make them feel good about themselves, then that will convey,
leave. My shoes may come off. They'll never see that. You know, those are the kind of things I'm talking about.
Is a business suit a matching jacket and skirt, or is it just a skirt and jacket?
And you automatically create credibility in those colors. Now, if you walk into a room wearing hot pink, excuse me, I'm going to have a difficult time taking you seriously. And that's really true, and people need to be aware of that. Women especially need to be aware of that. If you smile too much, that is considered a weakness.
Oh.
You need to be careful of this. Depending, like I said, once again, well, if you're trying to develop a rapport between a gentleman, you're interested in starting a relationship, yeah, smile all you want. But the point is if you're trying to create a professional image, you want to be real careful of being sweet and cute.
And another thing that's a possibility,
I learned that the hard way.
I heard that, is that if you are afraid that to give the wrong impression, let's say, hey, there's some good-looking men that do the interviewing, possibly. Yes. If you will look at the bridge of their nose rather than in their eyes when you're talking to them, they cannot tell, in essence, that you're not looking in their eyes, but yet you will not start a different kind of eye contact. So you look at the bridge of their nose.
I want to go to some of these interviews y'all have been to. I mean,
And hey, if you want to know more about interviewing techniques, we've done seminars on that, and she does that also. So Brenda Martin, just remember that. You said it didn't cost a lot of money, proper hygiene, and less is best for creating a positive impression.